Kennedy Meadows is an awesome place to ride woodsy single track. And no, I'm not being paid by Big Kennedy Meadows. I'd been hearing good things about it from several people, and I finally made it out. It took me a while because it's far enough away from me that if you want to make it a day trip, if you're in Los Angeles, it's like 8 hours of commuting back and forth on top of the actual off-road riding, so that's just a little bit too exhausting. It's a little bit far away for that. First of all, the trails are actually in a place that is formally called the Kern Plateau. This is useful if you're trying to search for official information about the place, but everybody seems to just call it Kennedy Meadows, which is the name of a small town that's right there. It has a store, it has at least one sort of restaurant bar place. In this video, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of what to expect, mixed in with some riding footage. But I'll link in the description to full, minimally edited videos if you're interested in the end-to-end trails. We had big plans to hit both of the loops you see here on screen, the one at the top and the one at the bottom. However, my riding buddy had a bike drop that led to a broken radiator hose, and so we had to cut it short, and I got some towing experience in. All of the riding footage you're gonna see are along this route and will be from one of Beech Ridge Trail, Albanita Trail, Little Horse Trail, or Black Rock Mountain Trail. I'll also talk a little bit about the experience trying to tow a dirt bike later on. So what's the riding like? Well, this being my very first time, my only direct experience is from the trails that I mentioned and that you're gonna see. But from watching a lot of riding footage from this place on YouTube, other people's videos, I'm fairly confident that it's reasonably representative of much of the single track in this area. There are some, such as Rattlesnake Trail, that seem to be more firmly on the technical side, like more Black Diamond-like. But again, I haven't experienced it yet. Everything we rode was pretty typical intermediate level single track, with the exception of short sections here and there which were more challenging and could be construed as Black Diamond if it weren't just shorter sections. You'll see some of this that I'm going to show you. At no point did we encounter anything which would prevent an intermediate rider from making progress, even if paddling or slow walking the bike might be required in some places. I'd say that in terms of terrain, 3 main features stood out besides the awesome woodsy surroundings. The first is that dirt would transition between hard-packed and looser somewhat unpredictably, so you definitely want to pay attention and be ready for that. The second is that there were quite a few whoops. I personally enjoy whoops, my riding buddy less so. Either way, it's a little unusual, at least in my experience, to have as many whoops as we experienced on single track, based on what I've ridden in the past. It's by no means constant or anything like that, but it's fairly recurring. The third one is rocks. There is a general tendency to have slightly rocky sections overall, coming and going. There are a few shorter sections where there's enough rocks to basically feel like a Black Diamond level trail. These are the ones that I mentioned earlier. But again, they're short and there's nothing that you can't get through in one way or another with paddling and or walking, as long as you're on a dirt bike. If you're on like a big adventure bike or something, that might be a whole different story. The footage you've been seeing in the background should be fairly representative of most of the riding that we covered. Let me cut to a little bit more of that riding with the audio turned up, and then I'll show some whoops and rocky sections, and then we'll talk about the campground situation and what to expect logistically. Ooh, we're very tight between 2 trees here, handlebar wise. Yeah. I don't want to be breaking my peg off or something. I want to go up this in the other direction. Might be more fun. I didn't see that actually. Hopefully they're okay. Whoa, interesting. When I'm running like this, no, I tend to lock them out when I'm doing like uphills, like steep uphills. How about yours? Yeah, I mean, you do want to not be too, like it's a common mistake, right, to have them too bent, and that does make it more work. You want to have them like just slightly bent, just barely not locked, so to speak. All right, in terms of logistics and the practical reality of being there, the first thing to be aware of is that there's no cell phone reception at all in the entire area. So you need to be prepared and have planned ahead if you're riding in a group. I recommend very clearly laid out plans for meeting up and a strict protocol for what to do if you get separated while riding. And I strongly recommend satellite SOS devices. The campgrounds appear to be well signed once you're there. It's kind of hard to find good information ahead of time, but once you're there, there are signs, at least for Troy Meadows and Fish Creek. Definitely do make sure you have offline maps downloaded to your phone, but once you're in the right place, you'll find a sign to get to the campsites. Specifically, the two that I paid attention to are the Fish Creek campground and the overflow, and the Troy Meadows campground and the overflow. The Troy Meadows overflow was closed at the time I was there, so I ended up parking at the Fish Creek overflow. A critical thing to know is that the overflow campgrounds allow day use parking, meaning you're just coming up your staging. The non-overflow campgrounds are for people actually camping. So it's first come, first served, and with payment. This is based on Troy and Fish Creek. I don't know signage. I haven't checked every single campground, but it seems like that's the system. I could be wrong, but at least that's the assumption unless you learn otherwise. So just make sure you know where you're going, and it can matter whether you're camping or not, right? So if you're going in a group and some of you are camping and some of you are not, that may be of relevance to you, and figure out when you're figuring out where to be. One of the great things about the single track here is that it's long, right? The two loops that I showed at the beginning of the video were around 40 miles each, and it didn't take us to the furthest away places either. So this is great because there's just a lot of single track to enjoy, and you can get on a trail and just enjoy it for maybe even an hour. But it does mean that you get far away from help and or the staging area. So careful planning in terms of having enough water and making sure that you have a plan for what to do walking back if you have a bike breakdown or something like that is more important than it might be at your typical OHV park or something like that. A good amount of the single track has intersections with wider roads, whether it's dirt or pavement, meaning that you may be able to avoid being very far away from places where you can get a truck to. But that's not always the case though, so plan accordingly, right? Look at the map. But one option here is to plan for not straying too many miles away from some kind of 4x4 accessible road, so that you know that you can walk back, get your truck, and get closer to the bike if necessary. That could be a way of like mitigating the sort of risk of like having a really bad day and not being able to get the bike out. Also be aware that there are bears in the area. We didn't encounter one, but it's apparently not uncommon to have bear sightings based on some folks we talked to. I did not personally camp. I'm not really into camping. Instead, I stayed at a hotel in Ridgecrest, which is about an hour and a half away from the Troy Meadows campground, which is a good place to start for heading out to trails. There are some motels a little closer than that, but Ridgecrest seemed like a good bet if you want a typical 3-star hotel type situation. Now, I mentioned that we had to cut our riding short. We were a bit lucky. The ride ended just a few hundred feet from an intersection between the single track we were on and a wider road with 4-wheelers on them. However, we did have something like 200 feet of rutted and whoopsie riding on an incline to get through. And I can definitely say that towing a dirt bike with another dirt bike and a tow rope is not easy in technical terrain, even though the incline was quite moderate. The bike wasn't entirely dead, it just didn't have cooling, so my riding buddy decided to risk it and basically ride it for about 60 seconds or so to get through that rutted incline, and then we towed it from there all the way to pavement. Once we got to pavement, we decided to split up, and I went to get the truck so I could come back and then truck the bike out of there instead of going super slowly for 15 miles to get to the campsite. If this had happened 10 miles away from the nearest wide road, we likely would have started by trying to tow and then either persevering with a lot of pushing and pulling of the bike or giving up eventually due to the inclines. I'm not sure how it would have played out, but it definitely proved what I always assumed anyway, that towing with a tow strap is not a viable escape path in many circumstances. Like if you're out on the trail, there's a bunch of gnarly terrain, you're far off, it's probably not enough, honestly. I mean, if you're a larger group maybe, and you can push and pull and you can sort of switch it out a little bit and people are rotating in and out. But yeah, it definitely be ready to just leave the bike, I would say, in the worst case. So I'll leave you with that. I'll put a little bit more riding footage, a little bit of a mix here at the very end for just a few minutes. Again, feel free to look at the links in the description for sort of full end-to-end riding footage if you're interested in just seeing the trail completely end to end.